Okay, hello. Welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about what to do if you can't access shadow work, if you can't access being in your body, if you can't access feeling. And what I mean by can't access is you have attempted to do these things. You've heard spiritual people and you've heard spiritual teachers say, if you're not doing your shadow work, if you're not going into your traumas, if you're not getting into your body, if you're not grounding into reality, if you're not doing these very like physical, feeling your feelings practices, you're spiritually bypassing. And I can say that I absolutely have been one of those teachers who have so overemphasized the feelings and the being in the moment and the revisiting your trauma and the finding the root cause of anything. I absolutely am one of those teachers who has spoken like that. So I'm calling myself out here, and saying if I've ever made you feel like you're failing or like you're doing something wrong or like there's something wrong with you, that you can't do these very embodied, very intense processing tools, I am sorry. And that was never my intention, obviously, but like, I am sorry. And today I hope to correct that and to be more reasonable and all inclusive in my approach. And so yes, if you've ever heard any other spiritual teachers aside from me, because I also, we need to start with compassion for ourselves, right? And so this is taking that even farther. That the self-love path and the journey forward is not this is not a path for you to go into self-discipline and to be another tool to use to be hard on yourself. And I'm going to give you tools specifically today for if these other practices are that for you. So yes, right? In order to transform, in order to truly heal, in order to truly um, become our true selves and step into our real authenticity, and to break out of the matrix, whatever you want to call it, to awaken, we do have to change. And we absolutely do have to feel our feelings. And we absolutely do have to get into our bodies. And we absolutely do have to process our traumas. And we're going to have to go back and revisit these things. Okay, yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. But again, at the same time, we all have nervous systems. We all have traumas. We all have histories that make it so that how we move through these things and the amount we are capable of processing and how much we are able to be with our feelings at any one time, how much we are able to be in our bodies at any one time is limited. Okay? So we are not here to push ourselves. We are not here to force ourselves. And I'm going to be talking a lot about that today. What it feels like, the difference between true processing that's uncomfortable and hard, but it's getting you somewhere, and I'm pushing myself and actually just re-traumatizing myself. Okay? So just quick side note, the construction is going on above my apartment. So if that's loud and irritating for you, I apologize. That sound might happen a little bit. Um, and I realize we're talking about like nervous system overwhelm, and that's just like, well, it's something to like scratch at your nervous system. So I'm sorry for that, but I hope that this information gets across to you anyways, and I'm sure I'll talk about it more in coming videos. So if this is just too much, I apologize for that. And then the second thing note is, if you're watching this on Facebook Live, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this in IGTV, any of the things that I mentioned will be in the links in the description. And if you're watching this live, just wait till it's uploaded to IGTV, and then the links for anything that I talk about will be in there. Okay? So, we are all human beings with human nervous systems. And I've been talking about this for the last year specifically. And if you've been in my mystery school, you know that I've been talking about like the physical side of things, the physical deep tissue cleansing, that our entire being, our minds, our bodies, and our spirits, and our emotions all have to come together to to go on this true healing, awakening, transformation, coming into yourself path. Okay? A lot of people on this journey, in this life, get hyper focused in one area at the expense of the others, or thinking if I just perfect this one area of myself, all these other areas will come along with it, right? So we have the spiritual people who believe that you can eat whatever you want and do whatever you want as long as you have your thoughts on par, so long as you're doing your spiritual practices, your body will be healthy. We have the opposite side of the coin, the people who just say if you just focus on your nutrition, like get your body right, get air, get sunshine, get exercise, get rest, get nutrition, you're going to be normal and happy and healthy and balanced. We have people who are incredibly focused on just do your emotional work, just like do your emotional work, and if you're really in your emotions and you become emotionally masterful, you do all your meditation, you do all your spiritual stuff, you get your mind under control, you get your emotions under control, everything else will take care of itself. And what I have noticed, and I think the patterns that we have seen throughout all of human history, is that this is not true, right? Like we've seen so many, especially in the spiritual world, like especially this year and these last couple of decades, we've seen these like spiritual figures that we've held on pedestals who shared such powerful knowledge and powerful truths with us, and who seemed to be enlightened or transcended or whatever, and then we find out that they were abusing people, that they were money laundering, that they were drug dealers, that they were addicts, that they were actually like incredibly depressed, or like they had these like all these skeletons in their closet, and we're thinking like, whoa, they were charlatans, they were bad people who were lying to us, and should we throw everything that they taught out? Like so much sexual abuse coming out, so much emotional and mental abuse, so much just these powerful people, these spiritual people seemingly just being deeply abusive, and we're thinking like, what happened there? And my theory has always been that their consciousness, their spiritual life went farther than their physical. Their physical trauma, their physical actual, like where they were on a physical level, where their physical self was, where their emotional self was so much lower than where their consciousness self was, that they could talk all this consciousness stuff, and they probably had deeply profound spiritual experiences, and yet this part of them was like pulling them down to this, that like where they actually were as a human, as a whole person, was not up here. It was somewhere down here, because they hadn't dealt with these things. And this is my point, this has always been my point, that is what spiritual bypassing is thinking that we can just deal with our spiritual selves, that we can just read all the books and do all the meditations and do our emotional mastery work or whatever, meditate our way, plant medicine our way into perfect liberation without dealing with the body, without dealing with our traumas, without dealing with our very human experience and needing to figure out what it is to be human. And I think that, I hope it's coming out that like you can't, you just can't. That every person we've seen try to do that, it hasn't worked. Okay, so this is why I talk about shadow work, feeling your feelings, being in your body, because this integrated journey, this integrated enlightenment experience, where you take your whole self with you, is the only way, as far as I can see, that we can't spiritually bypass our way there. So even the Byron Katie stuff, and the Eckhart Tolle stuff, and the law of attraction, and all these super, like, if you just focus on getting your perception correct, all of your pain will go away. Just like all of your pain is occurring between your ears. And if you shift your perception enough, either there's nothing bad in reality that is like truly bad in reality, that if you're fully in reality, it will never be painful. And the only reason you have pain is because of your ego and because of mind stories you're telling yourself. And if you just get your perception right, you will never have pain again. Or if you just get your perception right, you'll only manifest and create good experiences. It's like, that is bullshit, because, well, that is an incomplete truth, because we live in a physical reality with physical structures, physical laws, and it's not just whatever we want it to be. And there are things that are inherently painful because we are allowed in this reality to destroy things, and destruction will always be painful. And it's not that it's wrong, and it's not that it's bad. And like, I think, again, we do need to work through the, I'm in a state of destruction, I'm in pain, I'm confused, I don't know, and that's bad about me, and I feel guilt and I feel shame about that, versus that's just inherently painful because it's against the structure which wants to live. That's all that it is. Yes? So, again, looking at these things and thinking that we can just mind our way into it, and that we can just, or right, like that we can just stop focusing on the negative stuff, like the Tony Robbins, the, what's his name, Joe Dispenza, I always forget his name, the if you just, sorry about that, positively focus enough, if you just right, like, get rid of your bad habits, get rid of your self-sabotage, get rid of your coping, like, just like make new habits, make new strategies, just really positive focus yourself into alignment, and visualize your ideal self and feel your ideal self, and like amp yourself up to being this ideal self, and just like break the habit of being yourself, right, like that, break the habit of being yourself and just be something different. You can become uber successful and uber creative, and get rid of all of your pain and all of your shitty habits and all the things that are wrong with you, right? That their words, not mine. And transcend in that way. And it's like, again, no, that's not how it works. First, we need to understand that always, 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 forever, every single part of us is good. And if we can start to get to that, all the rest of this is going to make sense. And if we can't get to that, we're always going to be spiritually bypassing in some way. Okay? Because so long as we're working from a faulty foundation, so long as our base premise is something that is false, we cannot make true progress. We cannot truly get anywhere. Yeah? Because again, if you're starting on your journey heading in the wrong direction, you're never going to get where you want to go. If you're building a building and you're starting with rotten foundations, you're never going to have the spectacular building that you want. I hope that that's like a very logical. If you start with the wrong foundation, if you start with a shitty foundation, if you start with a rotten foundation, if you start with a false foundation, whatever you build on top of that, no matter how right everything else is, you're gonna run into problems. You're gonna run into issues. It's not gonna be what you want it to be, because you started with something not quite right. Okay? So that is why I say the self-love path is the ultimate path, because it starts on the one correct foundation, which is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. There are no bad parts of you. There are no faulty or broken parts of you. There's nothing wrong with you. You and all of your behaviors, all of your coping, all of your self-sabotage, everything that's going on with you is a response to you trying to live. It is you trying to thrive. It is you trying to survive. It is you trying to move forward. It is you trying to grow in the only ways you know how, against the antagonism of your upbringing, against the antagonism of society and culture that is fundamentally opposed to what you need. And that is the foundation for everything. If we can start with that, we need to start with that. Okay? That everything you are doing is an attempt to be yourself, an attempt to grow. You have made adaptations, or you are coping with, you are trying to cope with the pain of being in a world that hurts, that you don't know how to change, that you don't know how to make better, that you don't even know where the pain is coming from, why it's happening, or how to make it better. And that's what my whole mystery school is about. That's what all these videos are about, is that confusion of like who you are, what you need to grow, what's actually painful in reality, what's hurting, why it's hurting. That's the awakening journey. To figure out who you are. Yes, the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. All of psychology, all of spirituality is attempting to get at this, which is just, why are we in so much pain? Why don't we feel fulfilled? What do we want? And how do we get it? And it's at the end of the day, this is what we want. We want to be able to be ourselves. We want to be able to grow and express. We want to have a human life where we are growing and learning and expanding and having experiences and creating and expressing ourselves for how we are. And that doesn't look on anyone the same that it looks on anyone else. Yes, for some people, that, and also, right, that is not even what the capitalist society wants us to believe it is, which is like you find your job and then you have your like peak job moment, right? Like you become the actor and then you win the Oscar. Like that's not it. It's everything. It's your whole life experience. It's finding that purpose and that meaning, and that like I'm on the path all the time. So you like, yes, you're going to work towards things. Yes, you're going to have goals. Yes, you're going to have these external things that you want. And I'm going to talk about this in another video about my take on manifestation. That it's not really about getting the physical thing. That when you switch your focus from what is the thing that I want to what is the journey that I'm on and who am I becoming as I work towards these things, that is actually what gives us fulfillment. Okay? But this is what we want. We want to live lives where we feel like we're discovering ourselves and we're on the path. And we want to feel like we're on the path all the time. And when we can get a good grip of what the path is, which is just learning, which is just growth, which is just constantly having the life experience of life and learning from it what we can learn from it, you will feel like you're on the path all the time. It's not going to have to be like I'm looking for the signs, or like the big thing has to happen before I can know that I'm on the right path or I'm doing the right thing. Like I have to manifest the job or manifest the relationship or whatever. It's going to be like, no, like every day feels like it because I'm living that way. I'm living my life. And so that's the awakening path. It's that we're allowing ourselves to navigate the physical stuff. So like working on our nutrition, working on our movement, working on the traumas that are stored in our bodies, working on breathing, and then our relationships, working on our love and romantic relationships, working on our family relationships, working on our friend relationships, working on our career relationships. We're working on career or whatever it is that we kind of like do in the day. Our mothering, our fathering, our caretaking of the earth, our taking care of our houses, taking care of our people that we love, our neighbors. Like I say, we might have jobs, we might have not jobs, like maybe we study, maybe we are reading books, maybe we're listening to podcasts, maybe we're playing music, whatever it is that we're doing in the day. We have that stuff. And then we have the spiritual world. We have the connection to something greater. We have the devotion to something. We have all these areas of our lives that we're growing within and that we're nurturing, and seasons of life where one or two of these categories are more important than the others, and that's fine. And like seeing that it's just this journey. Okay, that's what the spiritual life is, and that's what the non-spiritually bypassing spiritual awakening path is. It's that we're becoming more of ourselves. We're learning how to learn from reality what we need, why we're in pain, how to get our needs met better and better, how to step into growth on all of these levels, in whatever area is pertinent at the time. And we're processing our past, we're processing our present, we're planning for the future, and we're connecting to something higher, and all this. And that's just the life that we're living. It's just the life that we're living. Okay? So again, this is why I say, like, it's not a heaven. We're not looking for a perfect after where we have everything figured out, because that's not how life works. Life is never going to be like that. Right? Like, I don't stand up here as a spiritualist and say I'm transcended and I know everything and I have nothing left to learn and I'm completely healed of all my trauma and that's why you should listen to me. No, I come here saying I was like really, really, really traumatized. Like really, really, really. And I'm even like I say, still learning things about myself that were like, holy smokes. Like, I was traumatized, man. And physically, mentally, emotionally, just not well. And if I can make as much progress as I have made out of chronic, severe pain, out of chronic, severe depression, and again, do I say that I'm perfect and I never have anxiety and I never have physical pain and I never have depression? Absolutely not. What I'm saying is I have made massive improvements, I've made massive understandings, I have changed my life dramatically, and it is possible to improve. And that is my point. And I started with the foundation of, what if there isn't something wrong with me? What if none of my addictions, my coping mechanisms, the ways that I am not my higher self, the ways that I am not able to, show up and work the way that I want to work, the way that all the things that I want in my life that I don't have, what if none of that is something that's wrong with me? What if I'm not fundamentally broken? What if I'm just an individual who has needs, and if I can figure out my needs and I can get my needs met, I will become the thing I'm supposed to become. And maybe I need to let go of what I think I'm supposed to become and just let myself become it and see what that is. And that is what gave me the capacity to do all this stuff. So, big picture, that's what the spiritual world life is about. It's about you becoming you. And it's a big, long, complicated, lifelong process. And these are the tools we use. The tools I teach in the mystery school, the tools I teach here, are the tools we use for life, for the rest of life, to have life be this thing. Because there's always going to be challenge, there's always going to be growth, there's always going to be opportunity to learn something new about yourself, there's always going to be something to integrate, there's always going to be something to navigate. We're never going to get there. And and it is my belief that true spirituality should be giving us tools for navigating life. Okay, true spirituality shouldn't be about getting you out of life, getting you out of the human experience, getting you away from this, perfecting you to some degree that you're no longer human and no longer having a human experience. That when your spirituality or your wellness or your health or your self-improvement, when your self-improvement path is not helping you navigate life, like giving you the tools to be in your life, to work through your inevitable traumas, to work through the inevitable things that come up that are hard and painful and that suck, that work through the inevitable tragedies of this life. Because again, anyone that tells you that you can get to a place where you're perfectly in control and nothing bad will ever happen to you again is blowing smoke up your ass. Because that is a childhood fantasy, that we are in complete control if we just take enough personal responsibility. We live in a world of almost 8 billion other people, and patterns that have been in the works since the beginning of time. This is a cause and effect universe where everything is connected. And we are small little blips on that. So yes, we have an impact. But ultimately, our impact on life is so minuscule. Like, it is happening to us. We arose within it. This tiny little blip of a tiny little human being, tiny little life in the grand scope of all of these cause and effect patterns that are like, have been in the works literally since the beginning. Right? Like, there is always going to be chaos. There is always going to be things we can't control. You are never going to get to a place where you control the weather or you control all other human beings and what they're doing, right? So like if anyone tells you that like you go out and you get mugged and you manifested that, like, no, you didn't. You didn't manifest that person and their whole life history of being traumatized and not having enough, and the whole system that made that possible so that their parents were traumatized and they didn't have enough and they went through what they went through, and then they just happened to need money right at that point and they decided you were the one. Like, you didn't have any control over that. So that can feel like, oh my God, I could just get mugged at any time. And it's like, yes, you can. And it doesn't mean you did something. You can learn something from it. It's like, what are you going to do with that? So if your spiritual tools aren't saying, okay, you got mugged, what are we going to do with that? That's what a spirituality should be. Not, okay, if I just do my spiritual practices enough, I can guarantee that it'll never happen again. No, you can't. That's not how life works. So our spiritual tools and our spiritual life should be giving us the tools to navigate real life, which so much of it we don't have control over. It's helping you figure out where you do have control, where you do have power, where you can make change. And that is like a lot. And it's giving you the tools for navigating, processing, integrating those things you don't have control over. The good things and the terrible things. The tragedies of life and the miracles of life that are just happening because they're happening. They're happening for a reason, cause and effect, but like, you were just a little blip that happened and it passed through you into your life. Yes? Because you're just a tiny little thing. That's what spirituality is. So if your spirituality is not doing that, it is on some level spiritual bypass. Okay? If it's not helping you figure out where your power is, and then helping you deal with the things where your power isn't, so that you can live your life and experience all the things, process all the things, and allow all of them to be a part of your growth journey, even if they kind of destroy you on some level, it's spiritual bypassing. Now, when we get into shadow work, feeling your feelings, being in your body, all of these things that I talk about, we have to absolutely acknowledge that these things are very challenging. Okay? For people who are severely traumatized, like me, when I first started doing meditation and feeling my feelings and being in my body, I'm going to just tell you sort of my personal experience. And remember, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not giving you a prescription, I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm just wanting to tell you what I learned from my own personal experience. Okay? When I first started getting into this, and I started getting into meditation, I made this deal with myself that I was just going to sit in meditation for an hour a day no matter what. And let me tell you, it was hell. It was like the most painful, horrible, uncomfortable mess of a situation that, looking back, I wish I had known what I know now and been a lot gentler on myself. But I'm glad, because I was my own guinea pig, and I can kind of give you, hopefully, some words of wisdom from having learned from my path, right? That when I would sit in meditation, when I would sit and be still and do these not spiritually bypassing things, right? Being in my feelings, feeling my body, feeling what was going on in my body, looking for the messages, all these things that I teach. I was like in a hyper vigilant, trauma induced anxiety attack for the entire time. And because of my specific issues, right? Like being that I have Asperger's syndrome, and like literally I just got my hormone test results back and all this stuff, and just my cortisol levels are exactly what I thought they were. They are literally off the charts. Like, this is the chart, this is the range of where they measure, and at every point in the day, my cortisol levels were over here, like off the chart. Okay, so, and then also knowing that that means that my other hormones, my estrogen, my progesterone, they are all being antagonized and are very low. And then also figuring out that the way that my body processes things, I have a methylation gene mutation that makes it so that I make the precursors for dopamine and tryptophan and oxytocin and all of these things. But my body processes them way too quickly, so they're not ever bioactively active in my system. So I don't have serotonin, tryptophan, oxytocin, all of these neurotransmitters that turn into the feel-good hormones that lead to rest and digest, that lead to feeling calm, that lead to all of these things that help regulate you. I don't have them. So I've been in a hyper cortisol state my entire life, which is basically living in a state of constant fight and flight. And so that's kind of like a testament to the miracle of this mental emotional work. Because even though my physical body has stayed in this hyper state of trauma, my mental emotional state, my capacity to regulate myself, even despite the physical stuff, is like monumental. I am generally calm. I'm not flying off the handle. I can get a lot done in a day. I am rational and I'm reasonable and I'm not an emotional wreck. And if you can talk to my sister, you can talk to my husband. I'm a pretty balanced human being. And I get triggered pretty easy, but I can work through it and all this stuff. Like, my awareness of myself is very high. And that's because I did all these practices and I did all this work. But it was really, 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 really hard. Because my nervous system is so wired and so traumatized, okay, that I'm, like I say, in a chronic stress state all the time. So working with my thoughts and working with my feelings and working with my body and working with my emotions has been excruciating. It's just been really sitting in this mental, emotional, flood bath cascade of anxiety. And having to work through my traumas and work through my stories and work through my past and all these things through that. And so, like I say, I just kind of forced myself to do it. I really did. And like I say, it was really, really difficult and hard, but I also used some other techniques that I'm going to talk about in a second. And then, so please understand that if getting into this work, like doing shadow work, doing feeling your body, feeling your feelings, being in yourself makes you feel worse, right? So this is where we can get into people saying like trying to do shadow work, trying to do feeling work, trying to do all these embodiment. This is the actual healing work that you're supposed to be doing. Feels terrible. I want to listen to someone to tell me that I can just get rid of my ego. I want to listen to someone who tells me that that's not me, that that's not really who I am. That's not, I want someone to tell me that I can dissociate from that. I want a transcendental experience where I get out of that pain. right? I want to have that meditation. I want to have that plant medicine. I want to have that whatever that takes me out of this because I'm feeling this shitty feeling all the time. And trying to go into it more makes me feel terrible. And then if you have CPTSD, so look up the book CPTSD, Complex PTSD by Pete Walker. He talks about this, where in our childhoods, and like this is a big part of my mystery school and what I teach too, is that like in our childhoods, when we weren't given the tools for how to learn from reality, how to process traumatizing things happening to us that we didn't understand, that were painful, or we didn't get our needs met, where we weren't loved, we weren't embraced for who we were, where we were antagonized by our caregivers, we were dependent upon for everything. That's a nervous system trauma. Okay, and now this other doctor, his name is Dr. Gupta, and again, I've posted the link to the video specifically in the description, so if you want to watch the video, he has a theory so he's talking in the video about people with multiple chemical sensitivities and food sensitivities and electromagnetic frequency sensitivities and just like people who are like incredibly physically sensitive and having physical chronic reactions to chemicals and travel and food and things in the environment that are toxic. And he's saying like, yes, that's real. Like these things actually are toxic and they do have an effect on the body. But if they were as bad as they are for everyone, as they seem to be for these hypersensitive people, we would all be like these hypersensitive people, having these extreme reactions. And what he's saying is it's possible that the nervous system, the physical nervous system, is the exact same as the emotional mental nervous system we've been talking about here. So with PTSD, with complex PTSD, which is trauma from your childhood where you were abused or abandoned or rejected or weren't helped through your process of learning, through things that happened that you didn't understand in your little body. When we get reminded of that, because when the traumatizing thing happened, so what he's talking about is when we were first exposed to EMFs or mold or these toxins, that we may have been in an immune compromised state, that we may have been in childhood where our immunity wasn't strong enough for it, where we may have been in a situation where some other thing was happening that was perceived to the body as being very, very threatening. So a trauma, like you could have been like exposed to a chemical at the same time as feeling like rejected by your caregivers or abandoned by your caregivers, and like you were, and remember, to your childhood nervous system, that's I'm gonna die. And so that correlation of the chemical exposure to a time in your life when you were physically weak or a time in your life where you were mentally or emotionally weak got programmed into your body that this is like a huge major threat. So then even though you've now grown and you're in a situation now where you're not in a life or death situation, when you're re-exposed to that chemical, your body, because it programmed in this chemical equals death, it has a severe overreaction, a trauma trigger. And that's exactly what's happening to us when we are having an argument with our significant other that triggers us into feeling like we're that 5-year-old again and mommy's going to abandon me. And so we go into, oh my God, like this hyper I'm going to die state that we might not even recognize when it's just a disagreement with our spouse or our significant other. So in reality, it's not actually the life-threatening situation. It feels like it is to us right now because our nervous system has just programmed in when this happened, it was a life-threatening situation. So anytime it happens again in the future, it must also be a life-threatening situation, even when it isn't. Okay? So this is what we need to understand about trauma work, about body sensation work, about shadow work, is we're going back to these times where the nervous system programmed this thing that's happening is a threat to my life. Right? We understand this about regular PTSD. When I heard gunshots, explosions on the battlefield, that was a gun that could have been blowing up me. I was in physical, immediate danger. So my body programmed in that sound triggers nervous system response. So now I go home, I hear fireworks, my body reacts like I'm on the battlefield. Because that's wired into my nervous system that sound is correlated to a life-threatening situation. With complex PTSD, it's the exact same thing. This is what most of us are experiencing in our adult world, in our adult life, is that everything is triggering our nervous system to remember these times when we were in physical danger to our childhood nervous system, of being abandoned, of being rejected, of being abused, of not understanding, of not getting our needs met, of being afraid and not knowing why, of being, right, having something happen that we didn't understand, that we didn't know how to learn from. That was life-threatening to us as a child to get rejected and abandoned, because again, we could not provide for ourselves. It is not life-threatening to us now as adults. However, because it got programmed into our nervous system that rejection equals death, abandonment equals death, not knowing something equals death. When we experience it as an adult, even though we now have adult capacity, we now can be rejected and still get our needs met. We can understand our own needs and get our own needs met on our own. We can be abandoned, we can be abused, we can be all these things, and we have autonomy now. We are triggered back into that state where our nervous system takes over and it's like, nope, we are a child. And then it's going to say, do whatever you did as the child to survive. So that's when you learn to fight, to flee, or to fawn, and when you learn your coping mechanisms. So you go to food, you go to sex, you go to drugs, you go to whatever to numb the pain. It's not because you actually want the food. It's not because you actually want the sex. It's not because you actually want, it's because you don't know any other way to navigate the existential crisis that your nervous system is having, that your mind doesn't even know you're having. I call it in my program Displaced Desires. That really our coping mechanisms are covering up who we really are, what we really want to be, what we really need, the pain we're really in that we don't understand, because we had to flush all of that to fit into whatever our caregivers and our society, whatever wanted us to be to get our needs met, or how we adapted to get our needs met as best we could within an antagonistic environment. So rebellion and becoming someone who completely distrusts authority and won't believe anything that anyone says, and all these things, like same thing, all coping mechanisms for this pain of like, I just don't feel autonomous. I don't know how to figure out my own needs and I don't know how to get them met. That's the trauma. And then all these coping mechanisms that go on top of it are either keeping us from expressing what got us rejected, because again, to our nervous system, to express that is to die. That's why I say, the program that I have in the mystery school, you're gonna feel like you're gonna die all the time. When I was feeling my feelings, when I was learning to be in my body and my emotions, it absolutely felt like death all the time. Because to my nervous system, to be my true self was to get rejected and abandoned and to die. And I had to slowly show myself that like it's not like that anymore. That is how it was. Yes, that's absolutely how it was. But that's not how it is anymore. Right? Reprogramming the nervous system is the feeling the fear and doing it anyways. But before we get to a place where we can do that, some of us aren't going to be able to access that right now. It's going to be too overwhelming. We can't access a higher perspective. We can't access that thing that helps us to go through that thing that makes us feel like we're going to die and to get through to the other side, right? Because so much of the feeling the feelings, the doing the shadow work, the doing the being in your body work is about going through that process of feeling like you're going to die, going through it, like getting to that root core of it, and then getting to the other side and witnessing that you didn't die. Like literally having to get through to the other side, see that you didn't die, and then that's proving to your nervous system over and over and over again that what it got programmed in isn't correct. Not anymore. And if we don't have the resources, the inner or the outer resources, to work ourselves through that, we get stuck somewhere in the middle. Right? So we're doing our processing work, we're doing our trauma work, we're doing our feeling work, and we just get stuck in the feeling. We get stuck in the memory. We get stuck in the what we're making it mean now, because that's the other thing, that the triggers and the traumas of our childhood, we're not thinking, oh yes, I'm feeling triggered by this conversation with my spouse where he's rejecting me, because it's reminding me of when my mom didn't understand me, and I'm feeling like she was rejecting me, and I needed her to understand me to live. I don't need him to understand me to live. But I can see what's going on there. That's not what happens. When we get triggered, we just feel like, no, he doesn't understand me, and that is a huge disaster. If he doesn't understand me, then he's going to be antagonistic to what I need, and if he's antagonistic to what I need, then I'm not going to be able to get what I need, and I don't know how to get it, and if I can't get it, then I'm going to die, and this is like a huge problem that's really happening right here, right now, and oh my God, right? That's the story that's going on in our brain. So we don't get through to the other side. We never see that the story we're telling ourselves maybe isn't true, because it feels so true, it looks so real. The trauma is telling us that this is how it is. And then, of course, all we want to do is bypass it. I'll never do that again. I'm never going to get traumatized again. I'm just going to be in my powerful self, and I'm going to amp myself up, and I'm going to Joe Dispenza my way into just positive think, and now I'll never do that again. Or I'm going to do my ayahuasca, or I'm going to do my spiritual thing so that I never go there again. And of course, or I want to disidentify with that, like that's not really who I am. That's not my true self. That's not my higher self. That's not who I want to be. I can law of attraction that out of myself. I'll just positive belief my way into like, I'm sovereign. I don't need this. But no, we're going to have to get to, okay, why does that trigger me so much? Where in the past was that true? Right? This is like this is why the start of my program is about all this shame and all this guilt we have about ourselves. All these parts that we think are wrong and bad about ourselves. We go on and on and on and on and on in my course about how, no, these are all good parts of you. Every part of you that's reacting how it is that you think is wrong with you is surviving the only way it knows how. It's getting your needs met the only way it knows how. It's freaking out because it thinks you're going to die for a good reason. And then you start to go back and you look at, well, okay, well, what is that reason? Why am I reacting this way? And it's going to be because in my childhood, in my past somewhere. And it can even be in your adulthood. Not all of this is childhood trauma. When you were in a place where you felt like your autonomy was being stripped from you, your power was stripped from you, you were in a state of a victim nature where it felt like, or it was, someone had control over you. That's trauma. And in order to process that, right, your nervous system is going to correlate everything that was happening in that moment with a threat to your survival. So now anything that reminds you of that, it smells like this person. The song that was playing when this happened to you, it's going to trigger your nervous system. This is what, that's that. And so again, if we can't get through to the other side of like, okay, what was happening there? Yes, that was a trauma. Sometimes we have to literally just let it get through our bodies, like an animal. Like truly let it move through our bodies, and we will shake and we will cry and we'll feel it in our chest, and it's going to collapse in on us, and like we have to move through that physical sensation. Like let ourselves feel it and move the body, move it through the body and be held and supported, and sometimes we need someone else to witness us in that and be like, it's okay, you're okay, I'm here with you. You're going through this again, you're re-experiencing it, but not alone this time. And that's why in my mystery school, we develop the witness self, the higher self, the part of you that can have compassion for you, that can then witness the parts of you that went through these experiences and say, okay, yeah, that was horrible, and we're going to feel it, and we're going to revisit it, and it's going to feel horrible and terrible, but I'm here with you. You're not alone, and we're an adult now. Look. So this is what I'm going to get into, right? That's how we get through that. So if you are finding that being in your body, doing your shadow work, doing your feeling work is just too much, and the only things that make you feel better are the visualizing your new self and the ayahuasca and the um, completely be present or try to get rid of your thoughts or like all of these kind of, like I say, spiritual bypassing to me things, it's not to say that any of those practices are wrong, because they're not. There is absolutely a time and a place for positive intention and for focusing on who you want to become and feeling that feeling of being something new. That's legit. Questioning your thoughts, the work by Byron Katie, is amazing. Can I really be sure that it's true? And especially when we combine it with, was it true at one time? And is it true now? Right? I would say if we can take the work and do that, it would be like those 4 questions in the context of, was it true? Did that really happen? Yeah, it did. It probably did. And to my childhood self, that was a real thing. What's happening between me and my boss is reminding me of a thing that happened with my mom or my dad or my pastor or my teacher. And like, it really was true then. Is it true now? No. Okay, so how can I love this past part of myself and then rewire my nervous system but that's not happening now? Being in the present moment. Eckhart Tolle, you are not your ego. You don't have to completely identify with your emotions and your experiences and everything you're going through. Absolutely. Because that's true. This isn't all that you are. There is so much more to you than what you've been through or what you're feeling right now or what you're experiencing. But we don't want that to be it. Okay, so if those are the only things that feel good for you, do them. I'm not telling you to stop. I'm not telling you that spiritual bypassing, you have to get into your body, blah, blah, blah. If you can't get into your body, if you can't get into yourself without it just being this whole trauma thing, like what I talked about, right? Forcing myself to do it, and it was just like hours of pain. What I want to recommend is 2 things that you can do that get you started to being able to feel and do shadow work and processing work. First thing, learn how to orient. Like literally learn how to be in your room or like in a relatively safe place, which again, I understand for some of us, we live in a space where we're with people that we don't feel safe with. And it can feel like that we don't have a safe place. Okay, and I get that. But all of us have a room in the house where we can shut the door. We can put a blanket over our head. Like literally there have been times where I was like at a Bible camp where I didn't have a place. And I was surrounded by people that I felt completely threatened by. And it was just fully like I was alone and I was isolated and everything wasn't taken as sick. I literally sat inside of a closet. I'm not kidding. Literally I could fit just inside of it. I sat inside of a closet and I oriented myself. Often. Because it was like, even if it's just for 10 seconds, in this space, inside the closet, I'm not dying. Like, I'm not dying right now. I'm not being antagonized right now. I am actually okay just inside this closet right here, right now. So I would sit in the closet, and the practice for orienting yourself is to look all around. 5 things you see. Okay? 5 things you see. 4 things you hear. 3 things you feel. So that can be like the clothes against your skin, clothes, the breeze on your face, your hair on your face. Just 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you taste. So again, 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste, and then list 1 or 2 things where you feel you do have power. Right? I can control my breath. Like, even if it's just that. I can control my breath. That will help to reprogram your nervous system. And that is a feeling practice. That's being in your body, but it's not being in trauma. Because a lot of the time, right, when we get into our bodies, it's just all this past trauma. And we don't have the higher self, we don't have the safety, we don't have the tools we need to actually process that in a safe way to get through to the other side. Which is like, again, like what I talk about in my mystery school, or what you get therapy for, like what a good therapist is for, or that creating internal safety. That's a huge, long process. And sometimes we just don't have it. So when we don't have it yet, all these feeling things are not going to feel good. They're just going to re-traumatize us. So we start with learn to orient, so that you would just establish a connection with your adult self who has more autonomy than your child self did. That's it. Because it is true. Your adult self is going to have more autonomy than your child self did. Even if it's you have more autonomy to just understand what's going on, why it's happening, what you want and what you need. You may not be able to get it for yourself right now. You may not feel you have access to it, but you can understand more than you could understand before. And you can start to take small little steps, because that's the next, more than that, okay? Second thing is alternate nostril breathing. Starting with plugging the right nostril, inhaling through the left, plugging both, holding for a count, plugging the left nostril, breathing out the right, plugging both nostrils, holding out, in through the right, plug, out through the left. That's 1 round of alternate nostril breathing. And this will help literally, physically calm your nervous system. It helps to reverse engineer the stress process. So you orient, do a couple of rounds of breathing, and this can help just slowly reset you to your present moment where you're an adult and you have power. And that is what is going to help you do all these other processing things. The shadow work, the feeling work, the being in your body. It requires that you can be a safe place for yourself so that you can work through these things to the other side, to really question what happened, to be there for your little younger traumatized self, to witness your emotions, and to hold space for them, and all of these other things that I talk about. So I'm not saying don't do your spiritual bypassing work, because again, when we're doing it from a place of all of that, we can do it from a place of not spiritual bypassing. Right? I've accessed all of those tools, and they have been excellent tools for moving me forward. This is why I don't say any teacher or any teaching is good or bad, or right or wrong. I'm saying we can use it in ways that we're just continually spiritually bypassing. And now I'm saying there's a good reason we do that. Because a lot of us are just so traumatized, we don't have the tools, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the nervous system to process. So what do? Start with that. That is my practices, those 2 things, as often during the day as you can. To just start to reestablish your autonomy. That's all that is. It's just coming into your adult self slowly, a couple of times a day, into your present moment, where in this moment you're not dying. Just that. And I know that sounds dramatic, but that's what you have to do for your nervous system. Because it's programmed that what's happening with you is that you're in a state of death all the time. Right? If going into your shadow work and into your feeling and into your body and you're feeling like your life is trauma all the time, it's because it is. It's not something wrong with you. You're not weak. You're not lazy. You're not making it up. It's triggering a time in your life when you really were in threat. And it's making you feel like you are in threat now. And sometimes you really are in threat now and you don't know what to do about it. And it's like sorting through all of that is a lot of work and requires a lot of practice. So please start with, if only spiritually bypassing things that get you out of your experience and out of life feel good for you, it's not your fault. And you're not choosing to spiritually bypass because you just suck. Absolutely not. Everything that you're experiencing is real. Everything you're feeling is real. It is true. And we don't want to traumatize our own nervous systems by forcing ourselves to do these things and just feeling worse because we can't get through to the other side. Because we don't have the capacity to get through to the other side. We don't have that internal safety. We haven't built up the internal safe spot. We haven't built the internal loving presence. We haven't built the external loving presence. We don't have what it takes right now to actually work through the trauma. So being in these feelings just make us feel worse and remind us that we feel disconnected and that we feel unresourced and incapable. And so that's not your fault. That's not your fault. Do a little bit every day to just build your awareness of your adult self. That's the beginning of the witness. That's the beginning of the part of you that can do this work. Okay? It's the beginning. And last thing that I'll say is, for me, practicing asana was also monumental because so much of this stuff is stored in my body. And it didn't matter how much mental and emotional processing I did. There were limits because nervous system trauma. And so when I let go of all the intense exercise, I stopped running, I stopped lifting weights, I stopped trying to do HIIT and blah, 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 and got into, and like literally, I started yoga at 14 and I started Iyengar yoga. Like, I don't know if any of you know what that is. It's literally you get into a pose and you hold it. And then you come out of it. And then you get into another pose and it's like you're paying attention to like what your pinky toe is doing. It is not vinyasa power flow. Like think of vinyasa power flow, Ashtanga yoga, and then think of its exact extreme opposite. That's what Iyengar yoga is. And it was like the best thing I could have done for myself. Because it was getting me present. It was getting me present in my body so I could feel in a thing that wasn't a trauma. I could be in my body in something that wasn't a trauma. And as someone who's chronically ill, being in my body, if anyone out there is like, I hate being in my body because it feels terrible, sister or brother, I hear you. I feel you. I've been in chronic pain my entire life. I know what it's like that when someone tells you to get into your body, you're like, I don't want to go into my body. It feels terrible. It's painful. It's awful. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. I get it. You're not alone. I've been there. I still am there sometimes. That's why we build up to it. We build these pleasant things. And eventually, we get there. Okay, so start with orienting yourself. Start with breathing. Alternate nostril breathing. Start with gentle yoga, just as much as you can handle. Yin yoga, Iyengar yoga, restorative yoga. That's not binding. Okay, so, and again too, right? If anything ever feels terrible, don't ever let your teacher tell you, just sit through it. Not like that. If it's a trauma thing, they're either going to support you through it, like, do you want to face this and get to the other side to see that you're not dying? Or is that too much for you right now and we can get out of it? You still get to be in control. Because yes, there are going to be times and places where the healing is going to happen when we face the trauma, we face the fear, and we get through it. But we got to be ready for that. We got to have the resource. We got to have the witness. We got to have the external or the internal compassionate witness who's there with us. And if we don't have that, we're just the trauma. It's just going to be the trauma. Okay? So we build that witness first. That's what the orienting and the breathing and the stretching, that's what all that's for. Is learning how to be in the moment, feel your adult self, feel your higher self, feel whatever. And that's why these other practices of connecting with your higher self and all that stuff is so great. It's not don't do those things. It's bring that stuff to your trauma work. Bring that higher perspective of yourself to your past self, to your trauma, to your pain. Bring them together. It's not one or the other. Neither are wrong. It's that they need to be partners. That's what we talk about in my mystery school. It's combining these two. We build that witness, that stronger, that higher self, and we bring it to the traumatized, burdened, helpless self. And we combine them together. We get them to work together so they amplify each other and grow together so that we don't become these lopsided, I'm so far up here in my spiritual self and my physical self is way down here, and so I'm going to be abusive. We don't want spiritual to get pulled down by the physical because we didn't process. We don't want it to be these two disintegrated parts. Our spirituality shouldn't be disintegrated. It needs to be integrated. Bring them together. Work them together. So some of us need to build this first. And that's okay. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. It's not spiritual bypassing if it's a step on the path. You're building your connection with your higher self. You're building your foundation so you can bring that to your trauma stuff. That's fabulous. And then let it bring this trauma stuff up. And then this trauma stuff is going to inform your higher self. It's a beautiful marriage. Orient, breathe, move, build the witness, yes, then bring it. Do all the other stuff that I talk about, mystery school, whatever. Okay? So if you can't access it right now, you can do that stuff. But just know that that's building towards being able to bring this part up. Or you get a therapist, you get someone outside of you that can help you work through it and walk you through to the other side, but still with you being in control. Don't ever let anyone force you to face something you're not ready to face. Because sometimes there are going to be times where facing that you need to get mad at your parents, instead of being mad at yourself, you're just not going to be able to do it. It's going to still be too traumatizing and triggering for your little inner child that feels like, yeah, but if I admit my parents were wrong, then I'm going to die. Because they were everything to me. It has to be that I was wrong. And if you're not ready to face the real trauma that your parents didn't know, and you were unsafe, but look, it's okay, you survived and you're okay now, you're not going to be able to get mad at them and not be mad at yourself. You're just going to have to get mad at yourself. That's how you're protecting yourself. So that inner critic, that part of you that hates you and gets mad at you for everything, is just trying to protect you from pain. Again, the foundation is there's no bad part of you. We're bringing the higher self to these traumatized parts. We develop the higher self first sometimes. We got to do the spiritual bypassing stuff to develop that, to bring it to these parts. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. You can check the links. I love you. I think you're fabulous. Again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Every part of you is good. You are perfect. You are doing the best you can with what you know. You're not broken. The practices that feel good for you right now are right. Just make sure that you understand it. Context. Put them in a context. Okay? If you have any questions, you can leave them in the descriptions and all that stuff afterwards. And I'll see you in the next video. Mwah!